Hello everyone. Today we're gonna talk about the new Embed 2.0 runtime from Wized. Okay, today's stream, it's not about talking about Wized, the tool itself. I want to go deep into how the new runtime of the tool works. So Wized has three different parts. Okay, configurator. This is one part. The other part, it's the server. And the last part, which is what we're going to talk about today, it's the embed. Okay? Embed, or you can understand it maybe as the runtime. Okay? Configurator, it's essentially the tool where you create things. Actually, let me just pop it open for you so you understand what I mean. The configurator is the tool where you create things, right? Where you just decide what actions, what requests to set up. Everything is set up here in the configurator. Okay. The server, it's just used whenever something needs to happen on the server, like for example, performing a server request or loading something from our table or storing some data in a database, whatever. Okay. And then the embed, it's what powers the site. So when you have a site and that site is interactive, like in here, things are happening and you are just making things happen on the site, there's a library on the front end. There's a runtime that it's powering all these actions. Okay, this is what we call the embed in Wized. Okay, so in this case, we are about to release a new update to this embed, which is a major update because it has a lot of changes based on how it works under the hood. Okay, and what I want to try to do in this stream is explain the basics of this new runtime, because it has a lot of performance improvements and it has a lot of cool concepts that you can apply if you are building something from, you're coding something, you have any project, and you're interacting with the page, you're interacting with the DOM. If you want to use these concepts, I'm sure that they're going to help you a lot. Let's see the difference between the Embed 1.0, which is the one that is currently being used by everyone in Wized, and the Embed 2.0. Okay, I want to show you a couple of things on how they change. Okay, the first one is if we inspect how things are rendered. Let's just use this as an example. We have a list where we load some Pokemons, okay, and we render those Pokemons here on the page. Now, anytime that I click on this button, we're going to fetch again some Pokemons from an API, and we're going to render those Pokemons in the list. Okay, and I'll just open here my console, my dev tool, where we can actually, I'm going to zoom out because I can show you more elements, and I'll zoom in again later. But essentially, all these elements are the current existing elements from the list. If I click on load Pokemons, let's just inspect what happens. Okay, to remember that this is the embed version 1. Okay, so did you see what happened? I'm going to do it again. Okay, cool, like that. So essentially what's happening is anytime that we're fetching the data and we are rendering again the data, we're doing a manual action of destroying the list and then recreating the list again. Okay, this is what happens in Embed 1.0. Or, it would be the same if we had multiple elements and we changed some dependency from those elements, like the visibility condition, something like that. All those elements will be affected at the same time. Okay, let me show you, for example, if we hide elements. I have this slider in here, and with this slider, I can decide what elements are, how many elements should be displayed. In this case, we're displaying 50 elements, but I'm going to scroll down to, 5 elements, something like that. Okay, cool. So see what happens every time that I'm scrolling? Look at all the elements that is happening. Essentially, with it's, recreating the list every single time. It's taking this and it's re-rendering the list with the proper style conditions, because the elements that are not supposed to be displayed are being set to display none. The elements that are supposed to be displayed are being set to display block. Okay, so you can probably already see how this is not very performant when it comes to managing large amounts of elements on a page. Okay, now let's just jump to Embed 2.0 to see the difference, because that will set the basis to start talking about this new reactivity model. So I'm just gonna hover over this, and now let's just, first of all, I'm gonna set it back to 50, like this. Let me load the Pokemons again. Okay, so right now you're seeing how things are being recreated, because anytime that I load the Pokemons, the names are changing, right? So we need to update the names. But let me just decrease the amount of elements that are on the page. So I'm just going to set to 5. Okay, so first of all, probably you're already seeing the difference between Embed 1.0, where we are recreating the list again, and Embed 2.0, where we are just interacting with the specific elements that are supposed to be affected. Okay, so now if we load the page again, only the elements that are supposed to be affected are actually being affected. Nothing else is changing. Okay, so this is the base idea of this entire rework of the reactivity model. And now I think that we can just jump into coding a little bit, because I want to talk about the difference between what's happening in Embed 1.0 and what's happening in Embed 2.0. Okay, I'm actually not going to use VS Code. I'm just going to use templates, because it's very convenient and we don't need to interact with Webflow today. Just open stackplates.com, create a free account, and hit on a new project, and then you can follow along with me. And I'm just going to use let's use a big project. Yeah, with vanilla.ts. Okay, done. I'm actually going to close this, and we're going to go to the main.ts. And I'm going to zoom out once. Yeah, I'm going to get rid of all of this. Actually, everything like this. And just to make sure that things are working fine, let me do console log hey. Hey. Okay. Cool. Let's create a couple elements on the page. Yeah, let's create a couple elements, and then I think that I could get rid of this. Hold on. Yeah, I can get rid of this. Let's just create, for example, a heading. And each one, it's going to say, hey. And then I'm just going to say paragraph, some lorem ipsum. And then let's create 2 buttons. Type button. This is going to be button 1 and another button. I don't even know what am I doing right now. I'm just improvising. Okay, like this. And actually, I'm going to wrap all of these inside a div. Like this. And we're going to set this div. I think it's fine like this. We don't need to do fancy stuff. Okay, cool. So imagine that we want to recreate, first of all, what happens in Embed 1. Okay, so let's just imagine that you have a Webflow site and you want to add some interactivity. Okay, what can we do? Maybe what we can do is that when we click on button 1, we toggle if this element is visible or not. And when we click on button 2, we change the text to something else. Okay, very simple, but still, it's a good example to follow. So let's just identify this element. Let's say it's going to be data element. I love to use data attributes. It's going to be paragraph. And let's also identify all of the rest of elements like this. So this is going to be title, and this is going to be button 1 and button 2, like this. Cool. So first of all, when you're using JavaScript and you need to interact with an element, you have to first query that element. You have to get a reference to the object in the DOM. So we're going to do that. We're going to say title. It's going to be document.query selector and just data element equals to title, like this. Okay, this would be the first query that we have. This is going to be heading element, like that. Okay, and then we have a few more. We have the paragraph, and we have button 1 and button 2, like that. And I think that I did it like this. And this is a paragraph element, button element, and button element. Okay, cool. So actually, you know what? We have to, yeah, it's fine, like that. So imagine we want to do that. When we click on button 1, we want to toggle the visibility of loading in soon. Let's actually write this. On click, check current display state, and then set the new display state, and then actually that's it, you know. So let's do it. So button 1, on click, or let's add an event listener. When clicking on it, like this, what we're gonna do is check if the button it's displayed or not, right? So what we can do is, outside of it, we can keep a variable that keeps track of the visibility. So we can say something like, is button 1 visible? And it's going to start as true, right? So right now, all we have to do is, if is button 1 visible, we're just going to set it to be hidden. So let's say paragraph.style.display equals to, if it's visible, we want to set it to none. And if it's the other way, we're going to set it to block. Okay, cool. What's missing here? The visibility for the paragraph, it's not being controlled, meaning that now I can click on the button, but just works one time. Then if I keep clicking on it, it doesn't do anything. And that happens because we have to update the condition, like this. So when it was visible, we set it to be hidden, and then we store that it was set to fall. So the visibility was, now it's not visible. And then the opposite, we do the same. Okay, nice. So now, look at it. It's working. Let's just keep adding things. So when we hit on the button 2, add event listener, let's just say that is button 2 clicked. And actually, this should not be is button visible. This should be is paragraph visible. Okay, so if I click on button 2, I want to set this variable to is button to clicked. Okay, so what I will do is button to clicked equals to is button to clicked. Okay, so now I'm complicating things because I want to get to the point where you understand the difference between doing things like this in a declarative way rather than in an imperative way rather than a declarative way. And I'll talk about this in a second. But when I click on button 2, I'm just going to be switching the variable, this variable in here. Okay, so anytime that we click on it, we change the value. It's button to click, true, false, whatever. You can start with false, like this. Okay, that's good. But now imagine that I want to make the paragraph visibility only when I click on button 1 and when I click button 2, right? So we're adding more instructions and we're complicating things now. So imagine that, we need to make this happen. Now what happens is that whenever we click on button 1, if the paragraph is visible and the button 2 is clicked, then we set the style up like this. If the paragraph is visible like this, then we hide it. You know what? Now we have to change the conditions, right? Because it can only be displayed if the paragraph it's not visible. I'm already complicating too much. For example, like this, where paragraph is visible, we want to hide it if is button 2 clicked, like this. Okay, now things kind of already becoming a little bit hard to track, and the reason is because we have different conditions, and we have to manually define the steps that need to happen every time, right? Because whenever I click on button 1, I need to check if paragraph is visible in order to display this. But when button 2 is clicked, I also need to check again. I need to do everything again, right? I need to run the logic again. So maybe what we could do, for example, is just create another function. So it's going to do action, whatever. Okay. I run this function like this. And then when clicking on it, we run the action, right? But then like this, and then we run the action from here too. So whenever we click on button 1, we run this action. When we click on button 2, we also do this, but we run the action, right? So now it works fine, right? When I click the button 2, I cannot make the button 1 work, but when I click on button 2 again, now I can make this work. Okay. So let me get to the point of what I'm trying to explain here. What I'm doing right now, the way that I'm coding here, it's by using an imperative, I don't know how to pronounce, imperative way of declaring the instructions. Okay. An imperative way, it's essentially when we are giving the exact instructions that have to happen every time. We're giving the machine the exact steps that it needs to follow to perform an action. So when clicking on the button, perform all of this. So you check on that. When clicking on button 2, we update things and we perform the action again, etc. If I keep adding more logic, this is going to be complicated very fast, right? Because if I add more conditions, then I will have to check for the other conditions. If I have to, in a specific situations, I need to run a different type of logic, then I will have to also write a different path for that instruction, etc. Okay. When managing things like this, the problem is that it's very hard to granularly control how things are happening. It's hard. It's just hard to keep track of the state of things, right? And this is how Embed 1 was built. Embed 1, essentially, anytime that you make an action on the page, it runs all the instructions again. So it knows that there are requests. It knows that there are elements that are supposed to be to have a specific visibility condition. It knows that there are elements that when clicking on them, something is supposed to happen. It knows that there are elements that are supposed to replicate themselves to render a list, etc. So every time that something happens, Wized has to send all those instructions to the page to make things update. Okay, and then the problem is that things like this happen, where all these instructions sadly are not properly implemented in a performant way, because there are so many things that need to be checked. We need to check for the display property of the elements. We need to check for the position of the elements. We need to check for the text that should be added to each element. every single thing that it's happening has an instruction that it's running, right? Okay, cool. So how do we improve this? How do we move from Embed 1 to Embed 2? Okay, the specific difference is moving from an imperative way of doing things to a declarative way of doing things. Okay, so instead, and the main difference between imperative and declarative is that when you say, when you are coding things imperatively, my God, this word is very hard for me to pronounce. Imperatively, you have to tell all the instructions, right? So, for example, if I want to, I don't know, render a list. So just let's imagine that we want to render a list. We have to take the data. We have to query the template element. We have to clone the element X times as needed. We have to update each element on the list with the data, which each one of these will also have individual steps, like I have to query the sub-elements, I have to update the etc. Okay, but maybe instead of doing that, maybe we can just say, render this list, and that's it. So instead of telling all the steps that it needs to follow, I'm just telling it, hey, I'm giving you this set of data, render the list. And the machine should already know how to handle this. So we have to pre-feed those instructions to the machine. So anytime that we give it some different data, the machine knows exactly how to treat that data. Okay, and the way that we can implement this, it's with an interesting approach called signals. Okay, I don't know if you've ever heard of the concept of signals. This is something that became popular recently, although it's a concept that has been around for a long time. But maybe you've heard of something different like granular reactivity, observables, event emitters with effects, etc. Let's install a signals package. There are many packages that we can use. I'm gonna quickly use one of those packages so you can see how it works, and then we can maybe discuss how the package itself is implemented, how the package works in the background. Okay, so one very simple package that we can use, it's called React Signals Core. Okay, and it's essentially an open source package that you could use. And with this package, we've got signals already built inside with the different subdirectives. Okay, so let me install this package, and then we can go over this. I think I have to. Can I do this? Does it work? May not work. I think I have to kill it. Okay, so npm install React Signals Core, like this. Okay, and let me run the server again, like this. Cool. So let's import the package. I think that, do we have it? Okay, what's missing here? It is installed. Inside the module. Okay, I need to update the tsconfig. Hold on a second. This was not planned. Module resolution to. Oh, actually, it's up here. Node. Nice. Okay. Cool. So, what the package itself exports, it's a bunch of directives. So we have signal, we have computed, we have effect, we have batch, and that's it. So it's actually very simple. Okay. And let's just create a signal. Let's just say signal has whatever. going to be, or maybe we can say visible. And we can say that the signal, it's going to be first true, like this. Okay? So this is kind of the same approach as this. Okay? Which actually, maybe what we can do is comment out all this for now. Like this. So I can show you the difference. And we can call this is paragraph visible. Like this. Cool. Okay, so this seems similar. It's still holding this true value, but the difference between a regular variable and the signal object that we have here is that we can now keep track of changes in this variable. This signal is essentially what's called an observable. And an observable, it's an object that we can observe when something changes in the object. Okay, and what we could do is, for example, say is paragraph visible, we can subscribe to this value. Okay, and when subscribing to this value, we can just do something with it. So let me just do this, console log the value. Okay, I just subscribed to this specific signal, and anytime that the value from the signal changes, we can run a function. And in this case, the function, it's going to be just constantly log this value. So when clicking on the button 1, what we will do is value, it's going to be the opposite, is paragraph value, like this. And let me open the console so we can show it. Like this. Okay, so anytime that the value from is paragraph visible changes, we are console logging the new value, like this. Okay, so at first it might seem like it isn't much, but we have essentially turned the tables when it comes to reacting to things. Previously, we had to rely on performing the steps every single time. So click on the button, update the variable, set the paragraph to hidden or displayed, etc. Okay? But now, instead of doing that, I'm just clicking a button and changing the value from the variable. That's it. Okay? We're letting the variable to be the single source of truth. We're letting the variable to manage the state of that variable. Nobody else is handling that, just the variable. Okay? Which means that now that we can listen for the variable changes, now we can do something like this. Is paragraph visible? If it's visible, if it's visible, then we set the paragraph. If it's visible, paragraph style display block. If it's not visible, set it to none, like this. And now we don't have to worry about anything else. We just have to find that if the paragraph is supposed to be visible, then it's going to be visible, and that's it. And then this means that we can manage this very simple. Okay, the single place where the visibility of the paragraph is being managed, it's just in here. Now it's up to us to decide what value this is going to get, right? Because maybe with some specific conditions, we want the paragraph to be visible. Maybe with some other specific conditions, we don't want the variable, the paragraph to be visible. And it's outside of this scope to decide that. Now, let's just go back to the other example when we complicated things and decided to introduce button 2. Okay. Now, we want only to display the paragraph if the paragraph the button 1 has been clicked, and also button 2 has been clicked. And that's it. So what we could do is, let's create another signal, and it's going to be is button 1 clicked, and we'll say signal false, like this, and is button to click, signal to false, right? And now let's imagine that we just want to show the paragraph if button 1 and button 2 have been clicked. Okay? If any of both has not been clicked, then we don't want to show the paragraph. Okay? So what we can do is instead of having the signal like this, we can convert this state to a computed state. Okay? And a computed state, you probably already heard of that because this is coming to Wized too with the new embed. The computed state, we can say that it's is button 1 clicked and it's button 2 clicked. Oops, not signal, but signals like this. A computed signal, essentially it's a signal that depends on other signals. Okay? So anytime that is button 1 clicked or is button 2 clicked changes, is paragraph visible will run again this callback that it's defining, hey, tell me if button 1 is clicked and button 2 is clicked, like this. And now all we have to do is just say this and this. So when we click on the button 1, we say that it was clicked. And when we click on button 2, we say that it was also clicked. And now, hold on. Something is not working. Says paragraph visible. Button 1 clicked, button 2 clicked. Okay, let me console log this for a sec. No value. Oh no, it's visible. Okay. Okay, something is not working. And I can seem to find oh. Come on. What? Oh. So it's a signal now? That's what was missing. Hold on a second. Sorry guys, I just wanna make sure that I'm explaining things correctly. Because something it's not right here. And I don't know why. Is visible false? Yeah, that's right. And if I set this, then it's visible true. That's right. So things are working fine. So what seems to not working fine is the button clicks. Click. And click. Need to make sure that things are being clicked. Okay, so this is being clicked, and this is also being clicked. And now I need to know, why is this not being updated? Because I was missing the accessor like this. Now we're talking. Okay, sorry, this was just me forgetting how to use things. But essentially, signals have to be accessed in the case of React with the value key in here. Okay, now it's working fine. Okay, cool. So essentially the signal's value has to be accessed from the value property. Okay, this is specific to React. Depends on the package that you're using. This might change a little bit. Okay, but that's it. Okay, so what's happening now is that we have these button 1 and button 2 at event listeners. Okay, but in this case, we don't have to worry about the instructions. Okay, the buttons don't have to worry about anything. The buttons just know that whenever we click on them, they have to update this variable. It's the signal, and that's it. And then we've decided that the rule for the paragraph to be visible is either if the button 1 is clicked and the button 2 has been clicked. And that's it. And because we're observing for this, now we're just letting things happen without us having to tell every single time all the steps that need to happen. I don't need to be telling, hey, when you click, check for that variable. If the variable is that, do that. If the variable is other, do the other thing. We don't worry about that. You just click, change the state, and let the state do the magic for us. That's the main difference, but it's actually a huge difference when it comes to big systems. Okay, so I think that now we can just go to drawing a little bit, so we can finally explain how everything is connected in Embed 2. What happens is that now, when Embed 2 loads on the page, what happens is that it scans for all the elements. So I'm just going to say like this. This is all the different elements from the page. Like that. Okay, let's just imagine that these are the building blocks, which would be, this button, this element, this input, this other input, this button, the template element for this list. So each element on the page, it's just a building block. It's just an element. Okay. And what we do is we collect all the instructions that you have created for Wized, and we create a signal for those instructions. So imagine that the first element, hold on. The first element, it's supposed to be visible or not based on a variable, right? So in this specific element, we create a signal that checks, so subscribes to be visible, where be visible is the variable, and hides shows the element accordingly. And that's it. And because of that, now this element has only one sole purpose, and it's listening for the be visible variable. And whenever that variable changes, then the state of the element changes. That's it. Nothing else needs to happen on that element. So that element is completely isolated from the rest of the app, right? Then maybe we have another element that says that, I don't know, this button in here. So this element, again, it just has one specific action, and it's that when clicking on the element, it has to update the visible variable. That's it. Completely isolated. So, and by splitting all the elements with only those concerns, and that's it, what we achieve is this fine-grained reactivity where we just mutate the DOM based on what's affecting to those elements, which, for example, in the case of this list, each one of these elements has one specific concern, and is when I'm supposed to be visible, I'm going to be visible. When I'm not supposed to be visible, I'm not going to be visible. And this is possible thanks to the signal which the element is subscribed to. Same happens for the text. If I change this, see how this text is changing? This is because this element not only has an action registered to checking for the visibility, it also has another action registered to checking for the text that it's supposed to be rendered on the element. If, for example, let me open this. I say like this. So imagine that I'm looking for some elements, and I say Tor. You can see how this element is not changing at all, because this element knows that it's still matching and it's supposed to be visible. So it doesn't do anything. It doesn't act. So it doesn't affect the performance on the page because it's not performing any unnecessary actions other than the ones that are required. Today, we've talked about the internals of Wized. It's become a little technical stream, but I think that if you're trying to learn how to code and implement everything from scratch, this is a great concept that can help you a lot. So if you like this, please leave a like, leave a comment. We appreciate it a lot. And see you next Friday where we're going to talk about something that's still not defined. We'll see, but I appreciate you being here. Thank you all. See you.